Hi, good morning. Today our grand round speaker is going to be Dr. William Roberts, who I'm sure everyone in the room is familiar with as being the editor-in-chief of the American Journal of Cardiology. He's also editor-in-chief of the Baylor University Medical Center Proceedings. Dr. Roberts received his MD from Emory, and from there went to the Boston City Hospital, where he did an internship in medicine, and then went to the NIH, actually to the National Cancer Institute, where he trained in anatomical pathology, followed by further training in internal medicine at Johns Hopkins, and then went back to the NIH for training in cardiology, and rose in the ranks of pathology at the NIH to hold various directorships of sections of pathology, ultimately becoming chief of the pathology branch at the NHLBI for over 17 years. In 1993, he moved to Dallas, where he's become the medical director of the Baylor Heart and Vascular Center at Baylor University Medical Center, and he's also Dean of the A. Webb Roberts Center for Continuing Education at Baylor University Medical Center. He's really one of the major figures in cardiology, particularly cardiac pathology in the United States, and we're honored to have him. We're talking about atherosclerosis today.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rabbani. Those are very nice words. It's a pleasure to be here. I love to come to New York. It's my favorite city to visit. I've never lived here, of course. Does everybody have these questions? Okay, question one, is atherosclerosis a disease affecting all animals or only certain animals? Okay, if we divide animals, let's say, into herbivores and carnivores, atherosclerosis is a disease of carnivores, herbivores, or both? Or does it matter? So you say carnivores, and somebody said herbivores, and we're talking about a disease that's going to kill half of us in this room. Atherosclerosis is a disease of herbivores. You can give your dog, a cat, tiger, a lion, all the saturated fat, all the cholesterol you want, and you cannot produce an atherosclerotic plaque. Number two, are human beings herbivores or carnivores or omnivores? Omnivores. Well, I'm not asking how we conduct our... Have other opinions? What? 30%. 5%, 30% going. Anybody else got an opinion? Well, you know, you're talking to somebody, and what your mother living, what she died, father would die. I mean, that's pretty important to you, isn't it? Well, family history is how we define it, and as far as I can tell, most families eat the same food. The whole family pulls up to the table, and everybody eats the same thing. I like to define the familial variety of atherosclerosis like Brown and Goldstein did, as you know, for identifying the Ldl receptors in the liver. Dallas is a cholesterol town. It's a cholesterol, sodium, potassium town. I grew up in Atlanta. Atlanta's a love-dub town with Willis Hearst down there. Heart disease became everything. But Dallas is quite different. And Brown and Goldstein have shown that most of us have 100% Ldl receptors in the liver. And our total cholesterol, and we live about 75 years. Our total cholesterol after a while is about 210. And this is 499 out of 500 of us. Normal numbers of Ldl receptors in the liver. And then there are a few of us that have only 50% Ldl receptors in the liver. And they die about 45 or so, and their total cholesterol is about 300, and that's 1 out of 500. So every 500 people walking into your office is going to have that familial variety. And no matter what kind of diet you put them on, it's not going to be enough to get those levels down low enough. And then there are, unfortunately, a few people that have no Ldl receptors in the liver. And they die about age 10, and their total cholesterols are greater than 750. Unfortunately, that's 1 out of 1,000,000. So we only have 262 of those people in the USA. Now, Brown and Goldstein have had another article in Science about 2 months ago. And they've shown a couple of other varieties of familial hypercholesterolemia. And so the familial variety, it looks like to me, is at most 1 out of 400, possibly 1 out of 300. So this is not a Presbyterian disease. It's our fault with very few exceptions. Number 4. Is atherosclerosis a consequence of aging and therefore a degenerative disease? That's what I was taught when I was in medical school. You know, you live long enough, you get it. Not your fault. Is it? This is basic fundamental stuff, folks. I think that question is a bit complex. It takes time to develop enough plaque in our arteries to cause organ ischemia. If we look at arteries to an organ, be it the heart or some other organ, leg, or tissue, we have to fill that artery up. We have to obliterate over 3/4 of the lumen in cross-sectional area in order to cause organ ischemia. So it obviously takes some time to obliterate 3/4 of our lumen. So age, of course, is important. Now the question is, just because we get older, does that mean we have to have plaque? And the answer to that is an absolute no. I've looked at the hearts now of 6 people age 100 or over. 6. 3 of them had clean arteries everywhere that I could see. One of them just had a few plaques, and a couple of them had a lot of plaque. But I don't think we have to have it just because we age. Number 5, what risk factors predispose to atherosclerosis? You name them, and I'll write them down here. Name them. Everybody knows them. Diabetes, systemic hypertension, cigarette smoking, sedentary life, let's call it inactivity. Okay, well, let's call it dyslipidemia. Anything else?
Small portion of genetics.
What?
You said a small portion of genetics.
Okay, but what does genetics do? What?
It can cause one of these.
One of these, does it
Like
cause this one?
dyslipidemia.
Okay. Okay, these are some of the common so-called atherosclerotic risk factors. Now, number 6. Of the various atherosclerotic risk factors, which one is an absolute prerequisite for development of atherosclerosis? Okay, let's go down the list here and say you have to have it or you don't have to have it. You have to be a diabetic to have atherosclerosis? No. So it's not a direct atherosclerotic risk factor. Do you have to have high blood pressure to have atherosclerosis? No. Do you have to be a cigarette smoker to have atherosclerosis? What? No. I didn't name these. You named them. Do you have to be inactive to have atherosclerosis? What do you have to have atherosclerosis? I come into your office, I say, doctor, look, I don't want to form any more plaques in my body. What do I have to do? Is atherosclerosis this multifactorial disease that it's too big for any of us? We can't get a handle on it? If I'm at a cocktail party or reception and somebody comes up to me and says, doctor, what causes hardening of the arteries? I say, ma'am or sir, what are your cholesterol numbers? That tells me. Now, how do you define dyslipidemia? I don't think atherosclerosis is multifactorial. I think it's single factorial, monofactorial. Okay, what numbers do we have to have not to have atherosclerosis? I come in the office, I say, look, I don't want any more. What do I have to do? What do I have to have? Or does it matter? It's a fundamental question.
Probably cholesterol below 150 or LDL below 100.
Yeah, I think that, so dyslipidemia, I would define as a total cholesterol greater than 150, an LDL greater than 100, and an HDL less than 20, anyway. So, what do you have to have not to have atherosclerosis? You have to have a total cholesterol less than 150. You have to have an LDL less than 100. It may have to be less than 80. And you have to have an HDL greater than 20. Now, why do I say greater than 20? Everybody knows 20 is a low HDL. When I was at NIH, Dr. Fredrickson had a patient who had a total cholesterol of 72 and had a bypass operation. What was his HDL? His HDL was 1. The ratio is 72. So if the total is less than 150, an HDL of 23 or 22, I don't think makes much difference. If the HDL, if the total is 140 and the HDL is 1, it's a problem. But in my view, atherosclerosis is a cholesterol issue. Now, if our numbers are greater than this, then these things become important. Every audience I ask this question, name the risk factors. Cholesterol is the bottom one. The bottom one. This is Columbia University. This is not Podunk Hospital. This is the disease that's going to kill half of us. And cholesterol is the forgotten one. It's unbelievable to me. When we were born, our total cholesterol in our umbilical blood apparently is about 75. Our LDL when we were born is about 50. Within a couple of months, that doubles. Our blood pressure, maybe that's what normal should be. Our blood pressure at birth is 90 over 60 approximately. In societies who eat no measurable salt, it's 90 over 60, a lifetime. A lifetime. Maybe this is what we need. There's some people now who say ideal cholesterol is an LDL of 60, an HDL of 60, and a triglycerides. You might snicker, but we have the capacity now to produce those numbers. Number 7. What evidence connects atherosclerosis to cholesterol? Okay, you're going to court. You got 12 jurors over there. And you've got to make the case to those jurors that cholesterol is the villain. What arguments would you present to the jury? Because there's a defense lawyer over there, so, oh, no, that's not right. So what arguments would you make? Tell me, I'll write them down. I come to the office, I say, Doctor, what causes these plaques? What's the evidence that cholesterol is the villain? Anybody? Framingham. And what does Framingham mean? And what does that mean? What? The best definition. Now, I don't know what that means to the jury over there. They don't know what Framingham means. I'm not sure they know what risk factors mean.
When we take a population of people and we measure their cholesterol, correlate their cholesterol with those people who develop heart disease, there's a very clear correlation with cholesterol.
Okay, so is what you're saying that if you take a population of people with increased cholesterol levels versus a population with relatively low cholesterol levels, those with the higher levels have an increased frequency of atherosclerotic events. Number 2, they have an increased frequency of dying from these atherosclerotic events. And thirdly, they have an increased quantity of plaque at autopsy compared to those with lower levels. Is that what you said? Thank you.
Thank you for making it clear.
Anything else?
Cholesterol in plaques.
Good. So you've got cholesterol in plaques. Very important item. Anything else?
Lower cholesterol, you have less incidence of plaque.
Okay, so that's, if you compare the high ones with the low ones, these have less frequency of these. Is that correct?
Yeah, but it's more than that, I think. This may just be coincidence. If you, the proof of concept is when you lower risk factor, the disease goes away.
What do you mean risk factors?
Cholesterol, lower cholesterol.
Okay, so what you're saying is that if you have high cholesterol and you decrease that cholesterol, that leads to decreased atherosclerotic events. Is that correct? That's a very important concept. It took the United States government, your taxpayers and mine, $150 million to do the lipid research clinic study. That really was the first one, and that was fairly weak to show that. Very important item. Anything else?
Populations who have low cholesterol, people who move from populations that have the highest low cholesterol to places where they now have developed high cholesterol, dyslipidemia is developed.
Okay, so if you are in populations with decreased cholesterol and you increase cholesterol, you increase atherosclerotic events. Is that fair? Is that what you said? Anything else? Anything else? What? What was the very first thing connecting cholesterol to atherosclerosis? The very first thing. (1908). What was it? If you give herbivores, rabbits were the ones chosen. Saturated fat, cholesterol, egg yolk. You can produce plaques similar to those in human beings, right? So you can produce it experimentally. All right. A very important concept. You can't produce a fin-fin lesion experimentally. You can't produce systemic lupus erythematosus experimentally. You can produce this stuff experimentally. It's fantastic. Wonderful indication. I think the work of Ldl receptors in the liver, which is a cholesterol thing, is also important in this evidence. So in my view, the evidence connecting cholesterol to atherosclerosis is as firm as anything in medicine. So I don't use the word risk factors anymore. I talk in terms of cholesterol. These other things, like high blood pressure and so on, are only important when the cholesterol numbers are increased. If you have a total cholesterol of 120, you can smoke 40 cigarettes a day, and you're not going to produce a plaque in your body. Now, you may destroy your lungs, and you may die of cancer of the lungs, but you're not going to develop plaques in your body. Number 8. What are the major sources of cholesterol in calories? I come in the office. You tell me cholesterol is bad. I said, well, I want to stay away from the stuff. What are you going to tell me? What are the major sources of cholesterol in calories? Simple stuff. Anybody?
Saturated fat.
What?
Saturated fat.
Okay, where is it? Now, saturated fat and cholesterol are quite different. Saturated fat are these carbon chains. They can be 27, 17, whatever, and every carbon atom has a hydrogen atom on it. Cholesterol are these benzene rings. Very different. Here, there's some more of these things. Anybody doesn't have one? The question is, what are the major sources of cholesterol in calories? Saturated fat is not a cholesterol source. The two eggs and cows. Now, eggs are about 45% of the cholesterol we take in. We only take in now about, well, roughly 300 milligrams of cholesterol every day. Milligrams! You can hardly see it. You don't even get a calorie from it. Minute stuff. About half the eggs we take are non-visible in salad dressings and all that stuff. Now, cows are about 40%. And that's the muscle. We call it beef to be nice. It's really bovine muscle. If you think of it as bovine muscle that you're eating there, you're less liable to eat it than if you think it's beef. And then there's milk. And then there's butter. And there's cheese. So, if you want somebody to decrease the quantity of cholesterol they're taking in this country, tell them to quit eating eggs and quit eating cows and the products of cows. Okay, number 9. What are the major sources of fat in calories? Now, fat's a different kettle of fish. Here in the U.S., many of us eat over 140 grams. Grams! This is not milligram stuff. This is grams. I can tell you a deck of cards weighs about 75 grams. A toothpick, in contrast, weighs 100 milligrams. So we take in the equivalency of roughly 3 toothpicks of cholesterol every day, and roughly nearly, in Texas, it's over that. In Texas, we eat over 2 decks of cards of fat every day. In New Orleans, it's even more than that. So the question is, on the table here, what are the major sources of fat in calories? Well, the answer is fat. We get fat from a number of different sources. One of the major ones in this country are cows, and that's about 30% of the fat we take in. Now, if you eat a cow in Europe, whether it's a mad one or a sane one, I worry about the sane ones really, not the mad ones so much, because there's so many more of them. But if you eat a cow in Europe, you don't take in much fat, because those are cows that have been out in the pasture, and then they bring them in and chop their heads off. In this country, we bring these cows into these feedlots their last 5-6 months of life, and there we feed them 20-25 pounds of grain and soybean. Why do we do that? We do that, of course, to make them fat. We want to marble them, because when they're fat, they taste better. And then we kill them, and then they kill us. And that's the way the system works. Every day in this country, we kill 100,000 cows. We have 282 million people in this country and 100 million cows. And every day, 100,000 hanging up there, 1,100 pounds are killed. In Texas alone, 30,000 of those are killed. And we're all killing them, folks. They wouldn't be killed unless you ate this stuff. Now, in addition to that, we kill about 300,000 pigs. And you drive through North Carolina and just sniff a little bit. There they are. Churchill called them our smartest mammal. Now, if you're a chicken, don't wander into the USA. We kill in the USA anywhere from 15 to 20 million chicken. Million! Every day. Every day. And we wonder why we have so much atherosclerosis and why our medical expenses are so big and why we do 830,000 coronary angioplasties every year and 500,000 bypass operations every year. All we have to do is quit eating all these animals because we weren't made to eat them all. Now I know you're going to go home tonight and have that steak, right? Or that chicken. Or that sausage. People can talk about this all day long, but to change somebody's habits, it's not a gradual thing. If you're going to change your habits, you change them. It's not gradual. You go home and say, look, I'm not going to eat any more cows. I'm not going to eat any more pigs. And then you don't have to worry about your body weight and all that killing. No country kills like the United States. There's over 100% turnover every year in these slaughterhouses. People can't stand it. Think Americans are working in there? No, all these migrants coming in from other countries. That's why they work. If you walk into a slaughterhouse in North Carolina, they'll hire you, period. Right there. They don't ask any questions. You want to work here? You got a job. That's what it's all about. It's terrible. Okay. Number 10. Which of the three components of fatty acids raise the serum total and LDL cholesterol levels? Well, fatty acids are a complex thing. And, we take fat in through these triglyceride particles, and then we have the saturated portion and the monounsaturated and the polyunsaturated. And that S stands for solid at room temperature. So if you got grease in a skillet, and it's solid at room temperature, don't eat it. Dump it, because it's saturated. Now, why do saturated fatty acids raise our cholesterol level? Anybody know that? And here you got these carbon chains. Saturated means every carbon is covered by a hydrogen atom. Monounsaturated means you've got one carbon atom not covered by a hydrogen atom, and poly means you've got more than one carbon atom not covered by a hydrogen atom. Now you go into the grocery store and you see that word hydrogenated, right, on these boxes. This is the hydrogenated fatty acid. Now what that means is they've taken a mono or polyunsaturated and they've hydrogenated. They've put hydrogen on it. So that means it's saturated, and that means it raises our cholesterol level. Now, how do these carbon chains covered by hydrogen atoms raise our benzene ring levels, which are cholesterol forming? And the truth is, nobody knows why. Nobody knows the answer to that question. I thought I was very inferior in my knowledge, but nobody knows the answer. But saturated fats clearly raise our cholesterol levels. Mono and poly either have a neutral effect or they lower them. Now, no fatty acid is pure saturated or pure monounsaturated. The question is, which one is predominant? Now, olive oil, for example, is about 75% monounsaturated and just a little saturated and a little poly. A fatty acid like palm kernel oil or coconut oil is 90% saturated and just a little mono and a little poly. So we certainly want to stay away from those. Okay. Number 11, what percent reduction in serum total and LDL cholesterol levels can be expected by decreasing the percent of calories from fat by 25%, 50%, and 75%? Now what I mean by that is this: if we've taken in 40% of our calories from fat, and that's what you want to know about any food. Percent of calories from fat. Whole milk, for example, whole milk is 50% calories from fat. But whole milk is 4.5% fat by weight. By weight is an advertising gimmick. Milk is 87% water. 2% milk is about 33% of calories from fat. There's no good milk except skim milk. Get the fat out of there. So the question is, if we reduce our percent of calories from fat from 40% to 30%, and this is the most commonly prescribed diet by physicians in the USA, how much does that lower our total cholesterol? And how much does that lower our LDL cholesterol? On the average, when that one person is sitting next to you, across from your desk, you don't know for sure. Each of us are variable. But if you take 100 people and you lower the percent of calories from fat from 40% to 30%, how much does that lower our total cholesterol? Anybody? 15, I hear. Going more? What? 10. Anything else? Are there any studies on this? Well, the answer is yes. The best one I know is Huntinghack's study in 1993. On the average, it's a 5% reduction. That means from 200 to 190. LDL, 5% reduction. Some more, some less. Now we got to be down here about 20% to really get a big kick from diet. And that gives us about a 20% lowering, roughly. Vegetarians are down here at 10%. Fellow in California, what's his name? His diet's 6% approximately. So we really have to lower that fat to get a big kick from it. Just like salt, we have to really knock that salt down before we get a blood pressure alteration. Number 12, what are the equivalent efficacious doses of the 6 statin drugs? And what are the average reductions in serum total and LDL cholesterol and average increase in HDL from the various doses? Does everybody know the rule of 5 and the rule of 7? You know what that is?
No.
You know? Does anybody know the rule of 5 and the rule of 7? Anybody? Well, it must be worth discussing then. Okay, if we see the statin drugs, in my opinion, are the best cardiovascular drug ever created. The statin drugs, and I have no stocks in any pharmaceutical company, the statin drugs are to atherosclerosis what penicillin was to infectious disease. They're incredible drugs. They're miracle drugs. They were introduced in this country in 1987. If you have a heart attack in this country, you have 1 in 2 chances of being put on a statin drug. And yet it's by far the most efficacious drug for atherosclerosis ever invented. Okay, if we look at these drugs, these statins according to potency, we've got Bacol or Ceruvastatin, and that's 0.2 milligrams roughly. They also have a 0.3. Then we've got Lipitor or Atorvastatin, 5. We've got Zocor or Simvastatin, 10. We've got Mevacor or Lovastatin, 20. We've got Pravachol, Pravastatin, 20. And we have Lescol or Fluvastatin, 40. This one was named correctly. Lescol means less effective. This is the potency range. Now, what do you get? How much does it lower total cholesterol? On the average, is 22%. See, if you go from a diet from 40% of calories from fat to 30%, it's a pretty good change. You get a 5% reduction. Here, you can take the lowest doses of these things and get a 22% reduction in total cholesterol. What's the average reduction in LDL cholesterol with these doses? Yeah, it's roughly about 27%. 5 more. I'll come back to HDL. Liver enzyme increase greater than 3 times the upper limit of normal is 0.25%, which is 1 in 400 people, which is the same as placebo. Same as placebo at these doses. Now, the rule of 5 has to do with total cholesterol. And the rule of 7 has to do with the LDL. And what that means is when these doses are doubled, you get 5% additional reduction in total, and you get a 7% additional reduction in LDL. The rule of 5, the rule of 7. So if you know these doses, you know the rules. Okay.
The potency per milligram is a meaningful difference between statins.
Say that again.
Whether you think that the potency per milligram is a meaningful difference, why would you want to take more milligrams of a lower potency drug on HDL? I think that
Well, I don't know the answer.
I don't think it means anything.
All you have to adjust for is efficacy.
Right.
So, you 20, 10, 10, 5. That's what you adjust for. These, Baycol actually, Ceruvastatin, may have a little more of this than the others. I mean, that's still up for grabs, but you just adjust for it. Now, Atorvastatin 10 is their lowest, smallest pill. And then you've got Simvastatin 20, 40, 40, and 80. The rule of 5, you get a 27% reduction, a 34% reduction, and this is 0.50, which is 1 out of 200 people. This is really being reevaluated now. How much of this elevation is due to statin drugs? How much is due to the fatty liver? We got 15 million diabetics in this country. Fatty livers, and a lot of them, they raise it. Alcoholics, how many alcoholics we got in this country? 10 million, 12 million, 15 million? Their enzymes are going like this. So not every enzyme elevation is due to this. And then we've got 0.8 here, and we've got 20, and we've got 40, and that's 80, and these are not FDA approved. And now we're up to 32%. Now we're up to 41%, a miracle. Now we're at 1%. This is not approved. Now we're at 40. Here we're at 80. That's not approved. Now we're at 37%. 48%. It's a miracle. 2%. And then the highest dose is Atorvastatin, Lipitor at 80. And the miracle study, and now that's 42% reduction in total, 55% reduction in LDL. And the miracle study was 2.5%, others were 2.3%. This is incredible. Now you give your ACE inhibitors, and you give your beta blockers, and you give your aspirin tablets, and all those things are good. But boy, that's where the money, biggest money is at, right there. When you compare the higher doses here, there's some difference in effect on HDL with Atorvastatin and Simvastatin at higher doses. At the lower doses, all these raise HDL about 6% or 7%. Now, 6% is not much. What is 6%? It's about 2 milligrams per deciliter. I think every time you see these percentages, you gotta take the numbers and figure what you're talking about. The abbreviations are, the percentages are more theoretical than the actual numbers. Okay, number 13. What is the LDL cholesterol goal of lipid lowering? This depends what your philosophy is. The new guidelines, adult treatment blah, blah, blah guidelines just came out again. And what's your guidelines for treating LDL? I'll tell you my guidelines. I think in this country we've got to decide whether we want to decrease risk or whether we want to prevent or arrest atherosclerosis. Now the pediatricians, they don't talk in terms, well, let's decrease the risk of polio. Is that what they say? No, they say, let's eliminate measles, mumps, whooping cough, and polio. Now here we have a disease named atherosclerosis, which is hereditary in 1 out of 400 people, maybe. And I think we should say the same thing. Well, let's prevent this thing and let's arrest it. Now, if we do that, the goal, in my view, is LDL less than 100 for everybody. And if you go by the guidelines, you know it's LDL and other risk factors. And if it's greater than 190 and you don't have any other risk factors, you want to get it down to less than 160. Now, of course, that's higher than the numbers in the average patient having a heart attack. It's absurd. Now, if they're greater than 160 and you have other risk factors, you know, you want to get it down to 130. But if you've had a heart attack and your LDL is greater than 100, you want to get it down to less than 100. Well, I say if it's useful to get it to less than 100 after a heart attack, surely it must be useful to get it to less than 100 before a heart attack. So my view is LDL less than 100 for everybody. Is that unrealistic? Is that dreaming? Good God, you add up the costs of nuclear cardiology.